So it actually took that horrifying crisis for me to reach out to my mom. Again, we didn't have a big family network, and we don't impose usually on our friends, even the ones who are like, whatever you need, I'm here for you. And I'm sure I could have had 5 or 10 friends who would have been like, oh my God, Ed, get over here. But I'm not going to ask because I'm so embarrassed.
Welcome to Desperately Seeking Senior Living, a podcast for sons, daughters, grandkids, spouses, and all caregivers who suddenly find themselves tangled in the search for senior living and care. If you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and check out our doable download in today's show notes for a printable summary of the show and a bonus tip. He walked into their townhouse and there was water running down the walls. After years of caring for his grandmother through dementia, Ed Taylor thought he could handle anything. But when a flooded townhouse became one crisis too many, he was forced to confront a truth that many family caregivers learn the hard way. No one can do this alone forever. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Senior Living. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and in this episode, Ed shares his 20-year caregiving journey that started at the age of 17. The lessons he learned, and how putting down his superhero cape ultimately allowed him to simply be a grandson again, and to find the love of working with other seniors and their families. Here's my conversation with Ed.
I never even considered myself a caregiver, right? I almost put it in 2 buckets. Like caregivers, I think of as professional, I guess licensed or, working for an organization, and they are not family. They're hired by family or assigned or however they come into being that caregiver, which is so ironic that I was a caregiver, right, for over 20 years, but I never thought of myself as a caregiver.
Isn't that wild? And I see that so often. And I'm really curious to hear your perspective, because a lot of folks, I think, when they don't think of themselves as caregivers, they don't search out caregiving resources because they just think they're helping. How long was it before you finally went, oh, wow, I need some help?
Honestly, Valerie, it was the hospital, the social workers and discharge planners at the hospital. After my grandmother had her, who knows, second or third visit, whether it was a UTI or a fall, it was actually the hospital folks going, hey, and I know they're overwhelmed and I can't imagine doing that job. But it just finally took the right one, when they come through and they're working on a discharge plan, because you've been there for a while now and things are stable. And what's the next, what's your next step as a family? What are you doing? And it took one of them to actually kind of sit down and go, so Ed, tell me, what is the structure at home? Like, what's the caregiving? And again, caregiving, what is your plan? Well, we never had a plan. I never had a plan. And so that was the first time where they actually said, there are resources. Like, I didn't even know DSHS. So my grandmother had exhausted, she never expected to live that long. They had retired really well, but, 10 years, 20 years into dementia, had exhausted all her resources. So there was a point where they actually said, hey, she qualifies for programs. And one of those are, hours, a certain number of hours for in-home care. Never even thought about it. Like, it had never crossed my mind. Because again, being in crisis mode and focused on that moment is all that's all the bandwidth I had, was what was the crisis of the day.
It took someone else stepping in. I think it's worth saying that you work in senior living, right? And so did you work in senior living when you first became a caregiver?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Matter of fact, now reflecting backwards, I do a lot of reflecting. Even though my grandmother passed more than 10 years ago, I reflect every day. And one of the things I reflect on is that I had no idea that she was giving me another career, that those 20 years of caregiving. And she had raised me, so this wasn't the first time she had done this. But no, when I left high school to care for her, and luckily got into working for family friends who had a real estate company in Bellevue, and found that, I'm good with people. Who knew? Being raised by a wonderful woman, she gave me these gifts of conversation and listening and respect. And so I went right into work. And then in the late 90s, with the .com boom in Seattle, I found myself working for a local .com startup, and I was there for 18 years.
Wow.
And that was throughout her whole, that whole caregiving span pretty much was doing that. And I had no, no background in caregiving at all, or clinicals or any of it. Yeah.
So how old were you then? And what did it look like?
Yeah, my grandmother's version of dementia was the very long, slow, steady decline that even it's very hard to pinpoint when it started. As I look back and know more now, especially being in memory care specifically, I realize her journey started probably when I was in my early teens, right? Like when I look back at decisions and things that were done, because she was the boss. Like my grandmother was the superwoman of all superwomen. And also in an age when that wasn't really common. Like this lady could do anything and did. And so that's another thing that we never questioned her, right? Who are we to say you can't drive? Or who are we to say, well, gosh, grandma, that seems odd. Or, why would you make that choice? It was not something that we were used to doing because she was the boss and so capable of everything. She was the caregiver of everybody, the neighborhood, the family, everyone. And so it was a real gradual. I'd say when I was 15, 16, 17, I started to see, especially looking back now, I can see it. But heavy duty, probably when I was 18, is when it really got to be pretty serious, where, okay, the family knew this is a change. Changed my future too, right? I would have probably gone to college and had get a traditional corporate job, probably through somebody in our neighborhood or somebody that we knew. This threw everything in a whole different direction.
Yeah, now look at you, senior living.
Yeah. And I don't regret it. I'm glad.
You said something really important, that role that someone plays in the family, and how when it's the role of leader and they can no longer lead, how complicated that becomes.
Yeah, she was everybody's power of attorney. She was one of those, I know you see this too in this industry. Oftentimes folks don't have kids, or they don't have somebody immediately there to be power of attorney. So it falls to a niece or an aunt or a sister or a cousin. And she was that woman. She was power of attorney for I don't know how many people in our family.
Oh my goodness.
In-laws, neighbors, because she was so accomplished and so successful and so capable. Like, I don't think she ever slept. I might have to go back and look at that, but I don't think she ever slept. She was constantly going and succeeding and capable, and give that to me. Give me that project. I'll do it. So actually, as I look back as a kid, I was in a lot of senior livings because she was taking care of family at Horizon House in downtown Seattle. She was taking care of folks at Madison House in Kirkland. We were visiting there all the time because she would do their books. She would be their care, when they had care meetings, she was the one. Because for whatever reason, their particular family just wasn't in their wheelhouse, but it was right in hers. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So there again, who am I as a 16-year-old to question this person of, hey, Graham, you forgot your keys again. Or, hey, Graham, where have you been the last few hours? Not knowing that she had been driving around lost, or got confused, because I'm just doing my life as a teenager and going, oh, well, this must just be aging. Maybe this is what aging looks like. I don't know. So like you say, somebody who's so capable, and then they're the ones who start this journey. How do you pivot that?
And did she sort of facilitate the handoff to you?
Luckily, I had been raised by her, and, God blessed me with being her favorite. So I almost felt in a way, because family dynamics, my gosh, is there a more complicated thing in the world? And ours was no different. Super, super complicated. So by her raising me, I almost felt like she groomed me. She gave me so much insight, and so much of her experience she gave to me. Like I said, the reason I think I'm successful now and throughout my career is because of what she gave me, and the importance of responsibility and follow through. And hey, sometimes you just suck it up. But then also that's a slippery slope, right? There's that you can do everything, and you put on that superhero cape and you're like, well, this is what we do. So it's a real fine line of, yes, that's fantastic. You're capable. You're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You're resetting, doing all the things, taking care of yourself, but then not asking for help, not realizing you need help. Yeah. But no, she gave me a tremendous amount. Well, and just leading by example, like I said, the fact that I was in Horizon House as a little kid and that I was at Madison House as a little kid and normalizing that, oh, this is what aging looks like. So that wasn't foreign to me.
Also, like you were saying, this happened so long ago. I feel like now we have a lot more media around dementia and Alzheimer's. We have way more resources. Of course, we have online. That's a whole nother, resource, right? But yeah, I mean, you're talking about a time when how would you know, not just because of your age, but just because of, we're talking about it, awareness. Yeah. Now, did she know?
Obviously, as the disease progressed, she did accept, it's all those baby steps, right? Not driving anymore, withdrawing from all the different committees. And, she was on every, lung association, heart association, taught Sunday school and taught aerobics at the senior center and all that withdrawing. It's almost a natural, we see that with dementia, right? That withdrawal, because they know somewhere in them that, oh, this is no longer comfortable. So and then as it progressed, she definitely knew she needed help. And in a way, thank goodness, because then she embraced okay, I can't drive.
How did that work when it came to stopping driving? Did she make those decisions for herself, or were you wrestling keys out of her hand?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Not only wrestling because there are ways to do that, right? You simply take the keys and there you've addressed it.
Can't find them. We can't find them.
but that doesn't change then that journey, and everybody's journey is a little different. And my grandmother's, we never really had it diagnosed, but because it was such a very long stretch, it was probably some minor strokes that just weren't caught, because she didn't have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. She didn't have a diagnosis of vascular dementia or Lewy body. It was one of those kind of mystery of what's going on. But we definitely fought those fights of, where is my car? And you sold my car, or you stole my car, or my car's right around the corner. Why can't I have it? So yeah, every day was you've got to have your head on a swivel. And okay, where is today going? I got very lucky for the most part. Hers was very gentle. Her demeanor and personality were such, and we know that doesn't have anything to do with dementia, right? The sweetest folks on this journey. The disease is brutal sometimes, right? And you get feelings all the time, like, please, my mom is not normally like this. Like, we know that. But I did get lucky that my grandmother, outside of maybe having a UTI or some pain, her dementia was, we were very lucky. But she got cranky sometimes.
So the car arguments were like sweet. You were lucky in that.
I was very lucky. Yeah.
What day-to-day things were you doing? Obviously cooking and cleaning and making sure she was safe and all of those things, but did it get to a point where you were doing more of the intimate care?
It did. And obviously, and families who struggle with this can certainly, appreciate a grandson taking care of a grandmother's hygiene needs. Luckily, we were extremely close from birth, but doesn't make it any less awkward. Or, having her apologize for, I'm so sorry that I'm such a burden. And we say, Graham, you are that's the last thing you are. But, and I realize it now, I think because I was so young and, we all have more energy when we were younger. It was easier for me to plow through it and not realize until much later that was like a 20-year goodbye, right? Like I lost my best friend, my mentor, my grandmother, like I lost all of that slowly, so slow. It's almost like the frog in the boiling water, right? I didn't know it even because of course, when you wake up in the morning, you don't make that decision of, that contemplation of, gosh, look at the bigger picture here. This is horrible, because I didn't have that time.
And like you said, you're in it.
You're in it.
You're in it.
Can we talk a little bit more about what that was like? Statistically, more caregivers are women, but there are a lot of male caregivers out there. One of my clients right now, the son and the grandson are caregiving for the son's mom. Can you just speak to what that was like emotionally for you to be a young man having to give his grandmother a shower?
Yeah. Again, I was lucky. It just wasn't a decision I ever made. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if she had an emergency or an accident, it just is what it was, and hey, Graham, I know this is uncomfortable, but I've got the water warm in the shower. This is what we do. It's okay. You did it for me when I was a little kid. And again, I got very lucky because she was so sweet, and that nature, luckily the disease didn't take that from her. It takes it from so many. But she got to keep that part of her personality. And if anything, like I said, she was apologetic that I'm so sorry. I'm like, Graham, it's me. Come on, we got this. Let's just do this. It just wasn't a choice. When your loved one, is in that moment and they've had that accident, it just is what it is. Now later, I'm sure I had moments, where it's like, oh my gosh, wow. Although I don't even remember that, Valerie, maybe it's being raised by her and just all that she gave me. It just was what you do. And our family was pretty small. It's interesting how small family gets also in crisis like that.
That's powerful, what you just said.
Yeah. And not just the family, but the whole community. Again, this was a woman who was in the newspapers and on the TV and very well known, and everybody knew Winona. It was just who she was, and that just shrinks, right? Like it all just shrinks. And it was part for her too, shrinking. But even from our neighbors, the neighbors that she had lived with, raised kids with, grandkids with, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years on Mercer Island, a small little tight-knit group. And she shrunk from all of that. And so it becomes a very private, very personal, sometimes kind of dark time. But you just get through it. And again, luckily I was young. Could I do it today?
I'm with you. Yes. A lot of coffee, for sure. A lot of naps.
Well, one thing also, we had humor. We had always had humor in our family.
What I was just going to ask you, what else has helped you?
And again, I think a lot of it, I don't remember making these decisions myself, but humor. You have got to recognize, you have to take yourself out of that moment and realize the humor in it. It may not seem funny at that moment, maybe if you have time for a little personal story, one of my favorite is, later in the disease, and this is something interesting too, my mother had been a little estranged, and when this all started to get a little bit more serious and she needed more help, my mother actually came to live with us. So her daughter, my mom, came to live with us and became her caregiver. Wow. And it actually restored my mother and I's relationship because I saw my mother taking care of the person I loved most. And it allowed me to go to work and, do all the things I needed to do, and obviously helped me. Those times when my grandmother was in rehab or at the hospital, my mother didn't drive, so she was always there. I would take her in the morning on my way to work, and I'd pick her up in the evening. So peace of mind. We have our differences, and that's a whole different topic, but that really helped me, having her involved and restored our relationship, which wasn't bad, but just estranged a little. That was hugely helpful.
The humor. I love that you have that.
So, I remember one Christmas Eve or Christmas morning or something, we're all in the kitchen cooking, and, so my grandmother got into this habit. My mom's name is Jane. And so it was always Jane. And obviously that dynamic, daughter, mother, even though they weren't the closest, it was still that gender. It was a lot easier when it got more complicated that my mom was there for some of that. And so I remember my grandmother coming out of the bathroom with no pants on, and we're all in the kitchen, and it's all, Christmas festivities. And Jane, I'm like, Gram, she'll be right with you. And she just had a little bit of an accident right there in the hallway, and looked around, and we're all looking at her. And it was just a little Hershey kiss on the floor. And she went back in the bathroom, and we all just kind of looked at ourselves. And again, I assume for some families that would be just horrifying. thinking of who this woman is and that just happened. But having the ability to realize the humor in that, like even she, if we could take like, look forward 20 years, Graham, she would be the first one to laugh. Like, oh my God, what was that? What just happened? Christmas morning. And that was 20 some odd years ago, and I still remember it. But instead of remembering it and feeling hurt or pain, I just remember the humor in it. And that we were all there together. And it's just one of those things that makes the holidays. And that was her journey. That's where we were at that moment.
You have to laugh sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is heartbreaking. So it's like you do have to laugh to get you through it.
Yeah.
20 years, that's a long time. I'm glad that your mom was there to help. You touched a little bit on the family dynamics.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable talking more about the family dynamics? Our family had them too. Yeah. It's really hard. And I think a lot of families are going through that.
So my grandfather had passed away. Her son, who was extremely dynamic and very well known also, he was a sports figure. He had a horrible accident at that time and was in a coma for like a month. And again, my grandmother's the one who takes care of everybody and does everything. So here she lost her husband, her son's in a coma. I'm a teenager, and I had been a little angel until, 15, 16. And, suddenly also there's no focus on me, right? There's other stuff going on in the family. So she's not watching me. So I'm kind of left to my own devices, causing my own version of teenage troubles. So here's my grandmother trying to keep us all together. My mom's kind of estranged, doing her thing. And my grandmother's still in that role of Sunday school, people's power of attorneys on every board you can think of. She's still trying to keep it all together. Yard work, driving up the driveway and seeing the 75-year-old woman on the roof, like raking leaves, going, "What are you doing?" And, she's like, "Well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it?" It was too much for her. Wow. It was too much for any human to do. And I feel like that's where her sort of break started, was all these things just piled up and stacked on top of her. And it just was too much. And whether, again, it was a stroke that maybe we didn't identify, or just the brain's coping mechanisms of, you know what? Nope. No more. We've been doing this for 70, 80 years. We're done. And so my uncle did recover for the most part, but it was a very long recovery. And her dementia journey is kind of right there along with his. My, again, high school years, right along with hers. Her taking care of everybody and kind of adjusting, though. And I think folks realizing, okay, Superwoman is, at her limits. Her and her sister were super close. Like, they had taken care of each other since little kids, in the Dust Bowl, and being shipped off as like 9 and 10-year-olds to be servants in somebody's house. And my grandmother took care of her little sister and made sure they still graduated high school. It started early with her being able to do everything. And so her sister and her were super close. And her sister actually told me, I remember, yeah, this will probably be the last time I visit, because it was so painful for her to watch. But there again, this was somebody I'd also grown up with as a tremendous mentor and icon. And for her to say, basically, I'm going to have to step away. I'm like, oh, well, gosh, okay, there's one less support system for me. And even changed our relationship. I'm like, it's kind of like, gosh, I thought we were family. But I understand, again, family's complicated. Maybe it just was literally too painful for her to watch.
Well, what would have made that, if anything, what would have turned that for you in that moment? If she would have said, I can't physically visit, but I'm happy to talk to you and talk you through this. And like, is there anything that would have made that better for you?
Having grown up with her sister's name was Farrell. And again, those two together, oh my gosh, what they couldn't do. And the vacations we took and the time we all spent together, best memories of my life. I would have loved or even expected for her to sort of say, I'm coming up, because she lived in the Bay Area, California. So we were always going back and forth. Just take over. I'm a child still, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. You're not equipped necessarily for all this. Although we see every day people doing it and getting through, but I wasn't equipped. She was financially and physically and mentally able. again, I don't judge her, but looking back at it, I would love for her to have stepped in and said, okay, we're putting some guardrails in place. Number one, like my grandmother went through vast amounts of money that we didn't really even know about.
Oh no.
She had obviously set herself up. She was a bank executive for 30 years. So she was all set. Things were in place. She was good. And we come to find out, wow, she went through a lot of that money, just bad decisions and bad choices and different financial planners. And I'm sure she got taken advantage of, and timeshares and, all kinds of stuff that I would love for her sister to have stepped in and said, okay, enough. Instead of saying, yeah, I probably won't be visiting and, kind of good luck.
It's so difficult. You bring up the financial piece, which I think is so important too, because, you have to have money, right? So, we see a big divide between those that have it and those that don't, and the resources available and maybe not available. But then now you have someone who completely set themselves up financially, but then we see a cognitive decline that nobody's identified yet. And this could be happening behind the scenes before someone finally steps in and goes, whoa, what?
Even the internet was so huge. Or, she would have definitely, with her heart and caring, she would have absolutely, if somebody had come up the driveway and said, you need a new roof, or, somebody called and saved the leopards or saved the rainforest, she would have been all in a way. Thank goodness it wasn't that time. But even then, she was able to make bad decisions.
Yeah. Now, when did you find that out? Like, at what point were you managing finances?
Yeah. I was probably in my 20s.
Wow.
And her dementia had gotten to the point where we all kind of realized it. But then again, there's still that hard wiring in the family, even our little family, of, well, this is Graham. This is the boss. Who are we to question? I think it was pretty late in the process that we actually kind of took away the checkbook and kind of closed some things down, and, debit cards and credit cards. And she had one good financial planner who actually reached out and said, hey, you need to know, if your grandmother keeps spending this way, things with her retirement are going to need to change. And that was a big opener of, well, what do you mean? She had always just had money. I'd never had any reason to question. So listen to any advisors out there.
This brings up another really important point when we're talking about, we've mentioned power of attorney. There is a financial power of attorney. And when it comes to cognitive decline, it can be very difficult. So at this point, were you already power of attorney?
I was not.
Wow. So how did you navigate that?
So, when we found it more, finances, again, back then it wasn't quite as complicated maybe as it is today, with passwords and logins. And I think there's a little bit maybe more oversight. It was easier. Well, and also having grown up basically in the bank with her, I knew.
They knew you.
Yeah, they knew me. So it was easy for me to explain. And they saw it too. She'd go into the local branch and, hey, what's going on with your grandmother? And I'm sure there were things that probably shouldn't have happened, where they're like, okay, we're going to transfer some money, or we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Because she was so respected in the bank, and she had such good friends that she had mentored and trained and hired. So we were lucky that way, which I'm sure not a lot of people have. A power of attorney really didn't come into play for us until it got into the medical scenarios, right? Where she was in the hospital and they wanted to do a next step, and they're like, okay, who's medical power of attorney? So it fell on my mom a lot of the time, just being the next of kin. And so she was able to sign. We didn't get power of attorney actually till quite late. Yeah.
Wow.
Once they've slipped to a point where then it's no longer ethical for them to give power of attorney to someone. So no notary is going to sign it, or, elder law putting it together for you when they're no longer, mentally capable of making those decisions. Then you get into some really tricky. We deal with that here in memory care, where families just haven't thought that far forward because nobody expects this. And then it's court appointed guardians, and it gets messy. Yeah.
Well, and even just to become a guardian yourself is about $2,000 process, depending on if you hire an attorney or if you're able to do the filing without. But yeah, it's much more complicated when you reach that state. So I do want to ask you, if you're comfortable, like with your mom, you talked a little bit about it earlier, but what did that actually look like where she finally stepped in?
Yeah.
And I don't even want to say finally because, again, it's so complicated. What was that moment where she stepped in and did more of the care? Was that a conversation that you reached out and asked for her help? Was this after the hospital said, "What's your plan?" How did that look?
So, that's a great question. And like so many, I'm reflecting on what I do every day with families. It was a crisis. So we had sold our home on Mercer Island and we're in a townhouse because it was more manageable. And I had come home from work and I pulled into the garage and there was a little water dripping on my windshield. And I thought, well, that's funny. It was a 3-story townhouse and the garage was on the bottom. And I thought, well, gosh, okay, what's that all about? And as I started going up the stairs, the carpet was wet. And when I got to the second floor, which is where the kitchen and living areas were, there was water coming through the light fixtures. There was water running down the walls. The paint had bubbled where there were big things of water. So I go running upstairs to where the bedrooms were, where my grandmother was. And she had left the bathtub going. So it had overflowed on that floor and all the water had gone down through the townhouse. And my grandmother's deal was she was a smoker. That's a whole nother story. And she was sitting there smoking, playing solitaire. She could play solitaire all day long. And she was happy, and she had her different programs she'd watch. And she was just sitting there at her desk, like nothing had ever happened. I'm like, Graham, what happened? Oh, completely oblivious. I kind of snapped at that point and left. And I actually drove around the neighborhood for probably 5 or 10 minutes of just, I have no idea what to do at this point. Zero idea. So I come back, call the fire department because I figure structurally, are we okay? They came, took care of that. And I called my mom and we had been kind of estranged. And I said, I can't do this. We can't live here now, obviously. And I literally don't know what to do with her. And I don't even remember where I went, but I knew I couldn't put my grandmother in a car with some of our belongings and go to a hotel. Don't we see that every day, Valerie? That it takes something awful.
Someone's going to be listening to this right now, and they're going to appreciate you so much, and I do too, for sharing the difficult part, like truly. But I love a couple of things about what you said. I love that you removed yourself, right? You had to take care of you in that moment in order to, right, put your face mask on or your oxygen mask, right, to take care of her. I love that you reached out for help. I actually love the idea of calling the fire department because I actually don't know that I would have thought of the fire department for a flood, but it sounds like they at least were able to step in and do something and help you, in that moment.
The first responders in the world, that's a whole calling, right? So of course they took care of her too, hey honey, let's get you downstairs. And, I don't even remember, it was so chaotic, but.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually psychology behind what you're talking about with the crisis. There is psychology that says we are so focused on doing what we have to do to get through the moment that we can't step out and see the big picture in order to ask for help. And so that's why it ends up being a crisis because like physically or emotionally or mentally, something breaks in us, the caregiver, and you just cannot move forward. And that's when you're asking for help, or it's intervention, like the hospital. Saying, hey, what's your plan? And that's where you went, oh, I'm supposed to have a plan?
Because you a plan? Or, I can have a plan? Exactly. But I was the plan.
You were. Oh my gosh. And your Graham was so lucky to have you. She was so lucky to have you. So how does the story evolve?
Yeah. So, she was super healthy. Even towards the end, I don't think she took maybe 1 or 2 medications. She just was built that way. So she lived to be 95, even with having dementia for 20 years or so. But, eventually it took a toll on her body and age, 95. And her last UTI, because so my grandmother was lovely. And again, we got really lucky that, she didn't always know who I was, but when I came around the corner, hello, Eddie, and I'm like, who am I, Graham? I don't know, but I love you. That's what I got. But one of her last UTIs, it took the hospital saying, we can't discharge her home. Like you can't, because we went through the different versions of, the hospital would send somebody to the house to make sure it was safe and put in railings or handbars or, the toilet riser or a low bed and supplies. But this last time it was, you can't have her go home. So we were in actually Federal Way at the time. There was a lovely place called Garden Terrace. And it was one of the first kind of, that I knew of anyways, memory care. Like they had a whole section that was memory care. That was a really good experience. Difficult. I remember I tell families this all the time when they come to tour. That first tour, because they gave me a list, the hospital gave me a list of places. And that's another thing, I somehow they were also ranked. And I remember going to the first couple that were ranked so high and it just didn't feel right? Like you've got to pay attention to that gut. Obviously your heart and your brain come into, but it's that gut. I knew walking into the first couple that this wasn't for her. Like it just wasn't, beautiful, great, wonderful. Nope. Something that one that I finally walked into, I made it maybe 10, 20 feet into memory care. And I think the first memory box that I saw outside somebody's room just washed over me and the tears came and I'm like, I can't do this today. Nope, I can't do this. And left. Like I didn't even make it into the community really. So I tell families that all the time, that's absolutely okay. Gosh, you take your time, you listen to yourself, you listen to what's going on. So she was there for about 6 months. And another thing I'll say is God bless hospice. I think a lot of folks I think they're scared of the H word, hospice.
Yes.
I was, because of course I'm like, oh my God, hospice. Well, that's it. That's the end. I had no idea hospice came with so many wonderful benefits and additional services and comfort measures and oversight and assistance and therapists and chaplains and music therapy. And now they have animal therapy, and hospice is nothing to be scared of. Those folks also,
absolutely,
that's a calling, just like the first responders. And you can graduate from it. As a matter of fact, I think she was, if I remember now, I think she went on and off hospice at least once. And I didn't know you could do that. I'm like, what do you mean she's going to graduate? She's 95, not graduating. Like, well, she's, we got her to a point because obviously in the community, they get things that I couldn't give her at home, just the routine and the help and, even culinary and hydration and all the stuff that communities do so well, that she got better. She bounced back and she was doing really well. So that, hospice, love it. Community living, difficult because I was not going to take that superhero cape off to save my life, literally, right? I was going to, this is my life. And I should have done it probably 5 years or sooner. Had I known that there was a support system out there, like these great, especially now that things have progressed so far since my day, and that I could have been her grandson again, instead of caregiver, project manager, activity director, culinary director, transportation services, therapist, all those things. I could have taken those hats off and just been her grandson again. Again, luckily our relationship was unique, so we did have that. But I am so grateful for those last 6 months to a year where I got to just go and visit and hold her hand and just be her grandson.
Absolutely. And I think it's also hard. It's hard for all the reasons that you said, but I think it's also hard because that Superman cape is a role.
It was my identity. My friends, people at work, everybody knew, oh, how's your grandma? Because of course I was getting called away all the time. I don't remember ever being sick myself, but I'm sure I exhausted my sick days within the first month or two of the year because there was always something. Grandma fell, whatever it was. We have to have an appointment that can't be missed. All those things. So that was my identity.
What was that like for you when she moved and that identity was then shifting?
Oh, you're going to make me cry now. I remember the day, because she went from the hospital right to Garden Terrace. And I remember finally, letting go and, okay, I can leave her now and go home. And I'm sure I had a thought in my mind, I'll go get her clothes and I'll bring her furniture and I'll do her room. And I'm sure I was in that mode of, okay, and now I have a whole new set of things to do. I remember getting home and there was nobody in the house. It was just quiet. I could feel it. I could see it even. And I laid down on the couch, or probably sat down and ended up laying down. It was sunny outside. There was a little bit of wind coming in through the window. And I think I fell asleep for probably 12 hours. I'm sure I passed out and woke up. And the first emotion I had, of course, was guilt. That how could you feel such a release and comfort and relax and let go in that moment when your person is somewhere now and you don't know what's going on or who's caring for her, or is she wondering where you are, or is she scared? But that I had let go and just collapsed. And it's like my memory, I don't remember a lot. That is vivid color, like it happened yesterday. And that was almost 15 years, 20 years. And it was like, yeah, I had never experienced that.
Did you seek support for that, or were you able to get through that?
I think because, had been so nimble and had to pivot so many times through all the different crises and moments, and having that great partner, having that community, that made it okay. That, no, these people love her. They did her fingernails, and when it was her birthday, she was all done up for her birthday. I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have gotten her a little crown and a feather boa and painted her nails pink, her favorite color, and made sure she had her favorite jacket on and had her favorite lunch, and everybody was celebrating her. I couldn't have done that. That made it okay. And that's why, again, that trusting your gut. There were a lot of places ranked higher. There were a lot of places had more, whatever, a pool or a restaurant or I don't know what amenity that I think a lot of families look at, and it makes them feel comfortable, right? That, oh, mom's going to love this. Mom may never use any of those things, but
right.
But I knew when I walked in that it was the right place. And I listened to that. Okay, this may not be the newest, fanciest, bells and whistles, whatever, but this is the place for her. Whether it was meeting their administrator, the nurse who gave me the tour, just feeling it. You have to feel it. And having done this now for a few years, I see that with families too, that, you weren't the first place we went to, but as soon as we walked in, we could feel it. Like, yeah, that is something. That's a tangible that you can't necessarily put on a spreadsheet either of, oh, I just felt it.
You can't. You can't.
This is how much it costs, and this is their staff, and this is the ratio, and this is their survey. There's that column of, but how did it feel?
Yeah, there has to be, because you know her better than anybody. And so there has to be that column.
I wish I had done it sooner. But as you know, it's, telling a family member that. No. It's a good thing you didn't have me as a client, because you would have been like, oh, wake up. Wake up, take that cape off. Luckily, I was young, though, too, because remember, this is my grandmother, and I was a grandson. If I had been 25 years older and been her son and been in my, 50s, 60s, it would have it did take a toll on me, but not like it would have an older, an older adult. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. Every journey it's interesting, because I feel like every caregiving journey has similar themes, but they're all incredibly different because we're different people. And thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Well, it's very therapeutic for me, Valerie, so thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, before I let you go, do you have just one doable tip for family caregivers? Is there just one thing that really stands out for you?
Having that humor and being able to take a moment of whatever it is and realizing the humor in that moment, whether it's a little fumble or a spill or a verbal, hiccup. And then also giving yourself permission. I remember a few key times where I had the mental ability to say, it's okay for you to take this moment. Well, just like when, the flooding, it was okay for me. Now, some people would have looked at that maybe and gone, oh my God, you abandoned her, right? In that horrible, I'm like, she was okay. The house was going to be okay. I needed those minutes to just drive around the neighborhood, probably with the windows open, going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, taking those moments, or even taking that, like passing out on the couch, giving yourself that it's okay right now. But then also I would say to families, don't be afraid of research. Maybe you may not be ready for community and you may not be ready for this big, huge next step in life, but do the research and get familiar. Get familiar with folks like Valerie. Get familiar with folks like myself. I am not going to ask you to sign paperwork today, but connect with me. Connect with all the Alzheimer's Association, all the things that are out there, because you'll find your community and you'll find your support and you'll find things you didn't know even existed, and just gather all that for the day when maybe you will make a decision. Don't be afraid of it. Just because you open up a website and go to, alzheimers.org doesn't mean you're signing your loved one off to some, facility somewhere. Have all that, just gather that information. And you'll find we're so blessed in this arena to have folks with the biggest hearts. And I have found, I'm sure you have too, everybody who's in this, there's a reason. And if you're out there, we're out there too. And we'll be the first ones to embrace you and be like, what do you need? Let me give you every resource I possibly can.
Today's episode is brought to you by ClearPath Senior Living Solutions. ClearPath helps families find assisted living, memory care, and other resources. Find our contact. Check out this episode's doable download in show notes for details, including industry terms and definitions we discuss. Have questions or your own tips to share? Leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you.